Hello friends, welcome to Raaj Academy. In this video, we are going to talk about NTA-UGC NET examination, which was conducted on 1st October. That is both the session, morning session and evening session. Right? Based on our assessment of this examination, you would find, rather I would say that this was one of the easiest examination ever conducted, provided you have prepared very well. Yeah. And as we have been predicting for the last 3 to 4 examination, majority of the question pattern, if you look at, were almost 40 to 45 questions were in the form of chronology, match the following, and equal weightage is given to even minor works of all the other ages, right? So, keeping this in mind, we are going to discuss some of the important questions which we were able to gather and remember on both the session, right? And after the assessment of these important questions, we would look at what are the strategies one should use to crack the examination, not just during the preparation and during the time of writing the examination. Let's look at some of these questions. So I'm going to deal with all the questions conducted in session 1 and session 2. So if you look at, as I have repeated, most of the question you will find almost match the following in chronology. Like for example, look at, there was a question on these 18th century, the neoclassical writers, and most of them were minor writers of the time, where they asked you to arrange in correct chronology, like Francis Burney, Maria Edgeworth, Anne Radcliffe, the the Gothic novelist, Anne Bronte, Jane Austen. Yeah. So there was another question on like Chaucer, arranging the Chaucer, different authors from different period, like Chaucer, Dryden, Langland, Oscar Wilde, and questions like arranging different novels of 20th century, modernist novels like Chrome Yellow, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, Mrs. Dalloway, Sons and Lovers. Very easily we could arrange that, right? Provided that we study and how the modernist period, how these novels, right, appeared. Okay, like the novel of Mrs. Virginia Woolf or D.S. Lawrence, Sons and Lovers, the chronology, right? Same way, the other novels from neoclassical and the neoclassical time, okay, anti-sentimental comedies like School for Scandal, and restoration comedy like Country Wife. Yeah. So similar way, the magazines, right? Magazines of 18th century, like Dr. Johnson's magazine Rambler, and they've given some 4 magazines and they ask you to arrange in chronology, right? Most of the question, if you look at, that is the way it has been asked. So holistic perspective of all these literature and with the chronological and social political aspect is required to answer these questions. There was a question on Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, which is which is the only science given by God to men. So if you go through the work, it was one of the work which was very important, which appeared during Restoration, and you will be able to do this test question. And of course, the question on Dr. Foster's, right, the preface of Dr. Foster's Icarus, and the work of Byron, right, okay, who wrote this. So this is not a major work of Byron if you look at the minor works of Byron, right? And the preface, which myth he talks about, that is the preceding question. Same way, who wrote the vampire story titled A Fragment, right? I think it was written by Byron. Harold Skimpole is a character in which novel? So we will find minor novels of Dickens, they've asked a basic question, right? So Bleak House or the remaining novels of Dickens are just minor novel, basic general knowledge is enough to attempt that. Same way, William Hazlitt, there was a question, they were asked a question and they asked to identify about whom it was described like that. And of course, the well-known question, Hamlet, to be or not to be. What is the exact meaning, of to be or not to be, right? Then there was question, a match on single alphabet work, right? there were some important 20th century work which appeared during that time, right, around 1930s to till today. Okay, so you will find very well general casual reading would be enough to attempt this. There was a question on Philip Larkin's poem on rape victim. Yeah, which poem of him is deals with that subject? General information is enough. Again, the chronological question on Robert Browning, arranging the works in correct chronology. Yeah, and of course the major question on Way of the World, right? William Congreve's The Restoration Comedy, written in 1700. The major theme. The theme is love and intrigue, right? So we know that the play deals with the intrigue, representing the Restoration Society, and of course Paradise Lost, right? Where in which book the marital discord happened, right? If you look at, you'll know that it is a book 9 where the argument happens. Same way the romantic writers and their work and match the following. This basic information would be enough to attempt this. And there was a question on King Lear, right? And 3 or 2 questions on based on this, right? If you know something about the plot line, okay, of this question, right? The basic question was who speaks this line, yeah, and something related to. I think the line deals with somewhere, where blind, Gloucester and King Lear, the cliff scene, okay, where the cliff he was imaginary cliff where he almost, pulls him down, right? It is somewhere deals with that scene, the scene, and they've asked 3 questions from that, right? So reading comprehension question. Usually we get 3 to 4 questions, but this time there were some more questions. But still, these type of questions are comparatively easier to attempt than that of one-word questions, right? There was a question on birthday party, right? What was the game which was played? The Diary of Samuel Pepys covers which 2 significant events of the time? And the answer is Great Plague and Great Fire, right? Samuel Pepys wrote this diary between 1600 to 1660 to 1669. And of course, there was a question on Duchess of Malfi. You will find what is the source of Duchess of Malfi, right? It's an Italian novella, right? And in a way, the whole setting of the novel is Italy. What are the 2 rivers mentioned in To His Coy Mistress? Right? We could expect, like in Duchess of Malfi and To His Coy Mistress, these are the major works. We should expect detailed questions. The same way, this is, we could say, yes, it's a very important question that what are the 2 rivers mentioned? The rivers are Ganges and Humber. Yeah, we often find that. And this question is repeated even, in one of the previous exams. There was a question on Waiting for Godot. Yeah, who speaks the particular line? If you know the plot outline and the absurd conversation between the character, very easily you would be able to guess that. And some questions on the other units also. There was a competence and performance question, right? The answer is by Noam Chomsky. Match the following. Again, a lot of questions on culture studies, authors and their work, critics and terminologies. For example, like Derrida, Foucault, their famous terminologies. Perry Boudret, 2 questions on him, right? And there was at least 4 to 5 questions on culture studies, right? And the basic studies on culture studies would be enough to answer these questions. And we have done all these in our classes, you know that. T.S. Eliot, the metaphysical question, yeah, on metaphysical poets. Philip Sidney, what are the 3 kinds of poetry Philip Sidney talks about? Philip Sidney is an apology for poetry, we get the answer. And the core of structuralism, Langue and Perrault. Langue, Perrault, the 3 aspects of, linguistic borrowed from Sassou's linguistic. Questions on post-structuralism, yeah, reception theory, right? Reception theory, there was a 1 question on that. And American literature, there was 1 question from Thoreau's disobedience, civil disobedience. The question on a jail, right? The Thoreau, how he spent his time in jail. There was a question on Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky's novel. There were 4 to 5 questions on English in India, right? Dealing with Macaulay, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, etc. And there were research methodology questions. If you look at very basic questions, and all of these questions one must be knowing, right? MLA 8 format, right? The correct referencing point. Feminist literature from the following, like The Yellow Wallpaper, right? A Room of One's Own, right? There was a question on semiotics, right? The basics of semiology. Aristotle's Poetics, there was one question, and ELT, right? What is paralanguage? And there was another question on epic theater, right? They've given the four important, the dramatists, those who were associated with epic theater, including Petrol Petch and others, right? So these were some of the morning shift questions. Yeah, but if you compare it, if you look at evening shift, we will find somewhat questions easier. Yeah, so look at some of these questions which were asked in the evening shift, that is afternoon shift. Which among the following is removed from MLA 8 handbook? Yeah. Then the question on identify the correct way of referencing according to MLA 8 from the following. Which two plays among the following are mentioned in T.S. Eliot's Tradition and Individual Talent? You will find similar areas question even in shift 1, morning shift. What do you mean by writerly text of Roland Barthes? Very important. From writerly text, from text to work and text. You know, the very well-known work of Roland Barthes. Deconstruction, the very definition of deconstruction. Author of Interpretative Communities, Stanley Fish. Reader's Response to Criticism, right? In which edition of, Spencer's Fairy Queen, Walter Raleigh's letter appeared? Actually, it was in first edition, okay, of 1590. Same way, what Lucky carries in his suitcase in Waiting for Godot? So there was a similar question on Waiting for Godot, right? But something. So if you look at broadly, same works, different questions were asked from, different areas. Tiresias appears in which of the following works, right? So we have Tiresias appears in Oedipus Rex and Antigone, right? The mythical Tiresias character. And Jane Eyre, right? Jane Eyre novel, right? Where did the name of the school where she studied, right? It was a Lowood school, name of the school, right? So unless the thorough study of the work is, if is not done, it would be very difficult for us to answer this question. Who organized the birthday party, right? Meg. Lysander was in love with which character? Hermia, right? That is Midsummer's Night's Dream, Shakespeare's play. Look at this play. Of course, it's a very important play, and like Twelfth Night and As You Like It, we attempt this play in detailed study. But again, the basic general question was asked. Yeah, match metaphysical writers with their work, right? Metaphysical poets, and they're matching their poems. Just casual reading of metaphysical poets, their works would be enough. Dolly's character in which novel of Charles Dickens, right? Barnaby Rudge, right? Barnaby Rudge is a minor novel, just basic knowledge of, the characters and protagonists, right? Or dramatic persona is enough. The study of poetry is written by whom? Everyone knows. I hope everyone should know that. Yeah. Rather, they should ask a very detailed question from a study of poetry, but it's a basic question. Who inspired Dr. Faustus to use black magic, right? In the previous morning session, we found that the question was on, the preface, okay, the myth of Icarus. Here, the very next scene, right? The two of his, colleagues, okay, Valdez and Cornelius. Identify the work of John Osborne from the following, right? They've given the list and identify the work. In Paradise Lost, Milton followed the pattern of whom, right? Virgil's, pattern. Of course, he was inspired by Homer's Odyssey also. Question on Pitgid and Serial, right? Chronological order of periodicals like Spectator, London Magazine, Edinburgh Review, Blackwood's Magazine, right? So these were the some of the questions which the morning shift written by our student, they were able to recollect, right? Unless we get the complete question paper, we'll be able to look at and how these questions would were there. So these were some of the questions, right? So if you look at friends, you'll find majority of the questions were from the core area. The core area of poetry, drama, novel, and here too we know the core area which we usually, we never concentrate because of the way our university syllabus are framed, right? So if you look at 70% of the question, would be from the core areas of British literature and criticism. That is what we have been repeating. And here also in British literature and in criticism, around 68 to 72 questions would be there. That's the way it has been for the last 20 years, rather we would say, and particularly in the last 8 years when the exam became objective exam. But here we must know what are the major important works of these writers, what are the major social political events which played a role, and in what way these works played a very important role. So general reading of these literature or criticism would not be enough. We must go through, we must prepare the core, transitional and landmark works, both in criticism and the other theory. But if you look at the other units like ELT, language in India, culture studies, research methodology, short story, non-fictional prose, around 4 to 5 questions were there from all these areas. So around you will find 28 to 32 questions in the last preceding two exams conducted in 2019. So there too we should know what are the areas we must concentrate, right? The casual general reading, reading without discrimination is not enough, and even if we take a very important works, we should know which aspect is very important, and that we'll be able to do keeping in mind the political, social, ideological and other aspect, and how it influenced the landscape of whole of British literature or European literature or English literature, or whether it's American literature in the last 200 to overall 500, 400 years. So that is very important, that you should keep it in mind. So I would say that, like, this was the most easiest exam, right? Because compared to all other exams, preceding exam, there used to be at least in-depth retaining ideas question, at least 50 to 60% questions we used to get like that. But this time, almost the basic general information on minor works of every period, and just match the following chronological questions were more, right? So in that sense, the major we have to concentrate and master the major important landmark works in every literature, every units, but at the same time, general casual reading of minor works, but at the same time minor works which were, there are minor works which had very one work or a very limited work a author might have done, but such works also played a very important role in representing the ideology and political social life of the period. So that discrimination is very important. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we should proceed. I hope all of you must be waiting for the results, and I hope that everyone must pass. And this is what we have been saying. So with this, I hope I wish you all the best.